So how big of a part of your job is the whole networking aspect of being a pro musician in New York?
That's a very good question, and I will give you my answer, which is I have never really done much of that at all.
Mm.
For a number of reasons. First of all, I have always believed since I was starting out that the best networking you can do is just get out there and find places to play, even if it's not much money, and play and have people hear you. And that has always worked for me over the years. And oh, okay, my I lost the screen for a second. It's back on. It just went to sleep. Um, I have a friend. I'll give you an example. I have a friend who's a great guitar player. Not a classical guitarist, though he plays some classical, but he's a great professional guitarist, and he is a great networker, and that's his personality, you know. And if he wasn't a networker, this guy is so talented that I'm sure he would have been very successful in music anyway. But, he's got it from both ends. So it's a good thing to do. And but I think the most important thing besides getting out there and playing is just that simple word marketing. And what marketing means is just that you have to constantly be in touch with the people who can book you, whether it's for performance or it's composing. You have to put together, if you want to be successful as a performer, obviously you have to have recordings, and today it's videos, DVD. You need a press kit. And if you're just starting out, well, how do you have a press kit? Well, that's the whole point too, is you have to start somewhere. You just get started. You go out and you do your best to work. Now, it's very, very hard to do. I started professionally in New York in 1975, and believe me, it was infinitely easier in 1975 than it is in 2010, because there were many, many more performing venues. This is really before your personal computers, before DJs, before so much electronic media. And the economy was different in the sense that there were many, many, many more places to play, to do live performance, whether it was doing concerts in libraries. And just imagine all the libraries around this country in the last year that have had their budgets severely impacted, that used to have concert series and don't. For the kind of music that we also play, classical music, classical guitar, this affects jazz players, acoustic players, there's a big change in the culture, obviously. I'll give you an example of that. And even in 1975, and certainly in 65 and 55, if you did a concert with the kind of group that I have, a string quintet, guitar, mandolin, violin, viola, double bass, and we play classical music and popular music, the audience, if you played in a place that was 500 to 1,000 people in the audience, you would have a pretty good mixture of ages, from young to old. Today, a group like mine, let alone a string quartet that just plays classical music, um, the audiences, you walk out on stage and you do see a sea of gray and white hair. You don't see, I think most teenagers and people in their early 20s would never be caught dead in an audience like that. Classical guitar, if you're playing classical guitar concerts in a series that's dedicated to classical guitar music, that's really different, because you'll get the guitar aficionados there, and that is a different age group. It's much more varied. You will have 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, but I'm just talking about more of the general audience for that field that we call classical music. Now, depends on where you're playing. In the big cities, it's a lot better. But there are many concert series that would have classical music that don't anymore. And I'll give you an example. My group spent from 1995 to about 2005, I think it was 8 of those 10 years, we were on the Carnegie Hall Neighborhood Concert Series, which is a series Carnegie Hall here in New York that sends groups, that has a roster of groups and some soloists, but mostly groups, and sends people around the city to community centers, to libraries, etc., under their sponsorship. In 1995, when my group auditioned for that series and we were accepted onto that series, I think we were like the least classical group in the series.
Yeah.
And in 2005, our last year, we were the most classical group on the series. In just 10 years, that's how much the culture has changed. So that's another thing that you're dealing with. But, you know, it's life, that's reality, that's, you can never live with any illusion. You deal with what reality is bringing to you, and you go forward.
Besides playing in hotels, you've also played in some comedy clubs for a while. You want to talk about that a little bit?
No. You laughed. I got to laugh. And I laughed. I mostly laugh at my own jokes. I did play in the comedy clubs from 1982 to 1985. In 1981, I returned after 3 years in the Pacific Northwest to New York City, and you're too young to remember something that was called the Reagan recession, which was, Reagan was elected in November 1980 and came into office January 1981. And 81, and going into 82, the country went into a very bad recession. I don't think at all as bad as this one, but pretty bad recession. And it was very hard to get work of any kind. And at that time, I was 29, 30 years old. And I was looking around trying to get gigs, trying to make things happen. And it was a very tough time. And I remember one night, I was living in Manhattan, and I was in Greenwich Village on a Saturday night. I had my guitar, and I walked past a comedy club that's no longer there, and I don't even remember the name of it. And it was audition night. And you had to contact them a week before to get on an audition night, but there were some openings, and I walked in, I talked to the manager, and I was able to go in, and I passed the audition. Now, I had no act, no routine, and the most famous comedian with music was Victor Borge, the great pianist, who was great artist, and so funny and so great. He was also, by the way, an excellent pianist. But I just made it up as I went along. And I had my Dustin Hoffman impression, which I thought of on the moment, which I'm not going to do right now. But that always got a laugh. And also in comedy clubs, they always had I don't know how it is today, it's been a long time, but there were always what were called the comedy acts and the music acts. And I was sort of a mixture of both, because I brought my guitar with me, and I did play. Usually in a comedy club like that, you have 10 to 20 minute sets that you'd have, and music acts usually did 3 numbers. And I think back then I must have played a Scott Joplin rag piece, and maybe Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles. And a great piece that always went over was the prelude from the E major lute suite, or you know what I'm talking about, the violin partita in E major. Also, there's a keyboard lute arrangement of that, because it was an exciting piece, so that always worked. And I would just I don't remember, I have no idea what I did with that night, but I just made stuff up. And I was accepted, and I got into that, and I did that for a few weeks. And then at that time there were 3 big comedy clubs in New York: Catch a Rising Star, the Improv, and Dangerfields. And I wound up auditioning at all 3. And those clubs would have auditions like a Monday night once a month. And I was accepted into the rotation at all 3 clubs. And so for 3 years, the first year, I was actually going up 5 nights a week. I'm pretty sure, looking back on it, that's the most fun I ever had in my life. It was just really, really great.
So why'd you stop doing that stuff?
I did it for 3 years, and then what happened is in early 1985, I was just focusing on playing at the Improv, and 2 things happened. One, which was very good, which was the manager there decided that music acts could only perform if they had at least some original material, which was not the case before. And I was told that on a Tuesday. I went home, and started working on a piece. And on Thursday night, came in with Molly's Dance. It's
Yeah.
the first time I ever played Molly's Dance. Necessity is the mother of invention. And so that was really good because it got me thinking about writing some music. But then that manager of the club left, and there was a new manager who was just really not a very nice person. And I looked around, so I had done 3 years. It had been great fun. I saw the experience going downhill, and I said, "Quit while you're ahead. Quit while I have great memories." And maybe in February, I think 1985, I just one day said, "I've done this. Time to move on." And